We'll go ahead and get started since we have a lot to cover in a very short period of time. Usually when I talk about this, I like to have at least an hour so that we can have time for questions and answer, because honestly the question and answer session really is probably the richest part of the whole discussion whenever we talk about what you're doing and what we're doing and all of those kind of things. But we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Michael Kasdorf. I'm from Georgia Regents University. And before we get started, you're going to see different logos for different universities in this presentation. We're part of the University System of Georgia, and when I started there 5 or 6 years ago, I was with the Medical College of Georgia. Then we had a new president, changed the name of that university, and then a year later, the university system decided that we were going to consolidate universities with Augusta State University, so now we're one big happy new university in Augusta, home of the Masters. So when you see different logos, that's why. So whenever I started there in charge of academic and research technology, the vice provost at the time really challenged me on how we could engage our students with mobile technology. So at that time, I was just dealing with the health sciences students. So one of the largest medical schools in the country, nursing, allied health, all of the typical programs you'd find at a health sciences university. And we were thinking about, back then, we were thinking about millennial students, right? Millennial students, that was the big thing. And they had different expectations. We knew that they liked digital tools. We knew that they liked mobility. We wanted to accommodate, a classroom without walls, all of those buzzwords and things that I know you've heard in your career and in the things that you've been doing. All about mobility. So to just set the stage, when we're talking about millennials, they have an array of electronic devices. They say they like to multitask, although the research, is questionable on whether multitasking is a real thing or an effective thing. And really, they want to be edutained, right? So they don't want to just go in a classroom, sit there, get lectured at, and leave at the end of the class. They really want a level of edutainment. They want their professors to be able to entertain them while they're being educated. And of course, they're very impatient, and they like immediate, customized results. They're bathed in bits. So this is, again, talking about the millennial students. And for them, their mobile phones were their digital Swiss Army knife. So they did a lot of things with their mobile devices, their mobile phones. So when we look at the generation now, we were focused back then in the early to mid 90s, we were focused on the millennials, which today is about 24% of our population. Now we're on to Generation Z, and towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk about Generation Z, which has a whole other level of expectation compared to the millennial students. So what we're trying to do really is have students where they feel like the world is their learning environment. They interact globally via mobile technology. Students take ownership of their learning, at least theoretically. And learning can take place through student-centered inquiry, and the mobile technologies all help that. So this is an example of some of the mobile apps that are out there in terms of healthcare and for the Health Sciences University. The space for mobile and healthcare is huge, and huge in healthcare education.
Completing our interproximal
and
reduction.
This is an example of a study we did, and you hear a little buzzing sound.
Just
that's actually
sure
the dental tool.
We've got
and I'll mute that
proper
because it
reduction.
can be disturbing. But this is an app where we did a study, and we created an app where we put content on the iPhone for teaching dental procedures. So dental students, it's a 4-year program. The first and second year, they learn all of the book learning, if you will. They learn all about the procedures, but they don't actually do the procedures until the 3rd or 4th year. And they forget. So between the first and second year and whenever they actually go into a clinic and see a patient, they forget what they did, how, they can't explain why they're going to do something and all that. So we did a study, and we took a class and we split it up, and we compared the learning outcomes on the procedures with the students that had access to the mobile app and that didn't, and consistently the students that had the mobile app outperformed students without the mobile app. That was just a small scale study. So back in 2009, this is when, right before mobile apps, for universities really became commonplace. We worked with Terribly Clever out of Stanford to develop a suite of mobile apps, and we were the first public academic health center to do that. Of course, right whenever we were in the middle of that implementation, Blackboard bought Terribly Clever, and our world changed, and things are different now than they were with Terribly Clever. So that was really our start into mobile education in 2009. So my team, part of my team, is the Educational and Collaborative Technology Group, and they're made up of instructional designers, multimedia developers, medical illustrators, programmers, a whole bunch of different people that create the team that does the mobile work. And we focus on student education, of course, for all of our academic programs. Because we are an academic health center with a hospital, we focus on patient education. We create a lot of references and tools kind of apps. And recently, we've got more into gaming and 3D and simulation through the mobile devices. So just to kind of go over the last 5 years of what we've done real quickly. So we started with, you see the logo for the Medical College of Georgia. We started with that convenience kind of app. So the one that we worked with Terribly Clever, and the one that most universities now have, where they get it from D2L or Blackboard or wherever they get it from. And we started back then, it was iPhone 3 and the BlackBerry. iPhone 3, that's what our students had. And the BlackBerry, we developed on the BlackBerry solely for our administration. So basically everybody that was above 40 years old at that time, back in 2009, had a BlackBerry. And we had one iOS developer. And the iOS developer was actually a Flash programmer who showed interest in mobile. And we sent her to a very good training program called the Big Nerd Ranch outside of Atlanta. It was a 1-week intensive residential program, 24/7, where she learned how to develop iOS, and she came back and helped us with some of the things that I'm going to show you now. The MedLab Tutor was our first app that we published, educational app, and it was 100% developed in-house in 2010. And that's to teach students how to read lab results. But it isn't just to teach them, it doesn't just present information and let them use it as a reference. It actually has built-in assessments and tools so they can quiz their knowledge and they can self-test and they can practice. We started on iPad development at that time. We had a breast care navigator app. So, whenever patients get diagnosed with breast cancer, typically, they meet with the doctor and they meet with a nurse navigator and they get a stack of papers that's about 3 feet tall and they're told to go and read it. And we know that most patients, they don't even consume 10% of that information or knowledge. So we took a different approach and we put it onto an iPad and we actually gave it to patients to use as a reference tool and to get through some of those materials. And it had images and videos of their caregivers so that before they came to an appointment, they could be introduced to their physician, all of those kind of things. The iPhone 4 was released at that time, and that added a lot of great new possibilities for us because of the new features that were in the iPhone 4. And so this is in 2010. We added another developer and a designer, and so we were up to 3 people in our mobile development team. Fast forward to year 3, which is 2011, we released a very cool app called the Upper Respiratory Virtual Lab, and I'll have a little video of it here in a minute. And it's basically a virtual rhinoscopy. So it uses the Unity 3D gaming technology, and we had a team of medical illustrators to help with the actual graphic content to make sure it was very anatomically correct. And basically it's a game, and students go through and they learn the anatomy of a rhinoscopy, but they do it in a more real-life setting. So teaching a rhinoscopy, as you can imagine, is a tough thing to do, and there's a limited number of patients. Students don't always have access to see that information all the time, so this is another way to do it. We released some other apps, Dentistry Pro Consult app, and what was neat about this app is we said, well, our mobile development team is stretched. We have a lot of things our customers are asking us to do. Wouldn't it be great if we had a template so we could just switch out content and we didn't have to redevelop the app every single time? So that's what we did. So the Dentistry Pro Consult, take out dentistry. It could be medicine, it could be math, it could be anything that's a procedure that students need to learn. Now the faculty can give us basically a Word document. We ask them questions on what they want the content to be. We help them with the multimedia, video, those kind of elements, and we can real quickly, in a matter of weeks instead of a matter of months, we can produce a native app that teaches students procedures. And we added a medical illustrator, and we grew the staff up to 6 at that time. So in year 4, we moved on to iBooks. iBooks, we published our first iBook, and this was actually one for emergency medicine, and they had a little pocket guide, and it was to teach emergency room physicians how to read ultrasounds so that they could be independent in the ER. And of course, the problem with that is that they see a static image. They don't really get to understand what the normal ultrasound should look like or what an abnormal ultrasound should look like. So we were actually able to embed multimedia into the iBook with the videos and all of those. And they actually published it and tried to make a profit on that. And we'll talk about the whole profit of mobile apps in just a minute. We have a children's hospital, so we started releasing iBooks. The Children's Foundation actually did some philanthropy, and they got some donors who wanted to supply the kids with iBooks because that's what the kind of tools that they like and that they're familiar with. And we created content, so whenever they go for an operation, it shows them the operating room, it shows them the different tools, it gives them little games, so it's not quite as stressful for them. We did some allergy games and other things. And we did another pro consult for ophthalmology, and then the iPhone 5 was released. So moved to more of our current state, we started getting more into gaming, particularly with the Children's Hospital. We launched an app called Build-A-Brain. So this is an app that does work on iPad and does work on mobile devices, but it also has a desktop version as well. So a professor actually had been teaching brain anatomy for a very long time, and she had pictures that were mounted on plexiglass plates, and the students had to take those plexiglass plates, and they had dowel rods, and they had to layer the brain sections in the right layer. So that was pretty cool back in the time when that was the great technology. And we actually virtualized it, so students can actually learn more about it. They can do this on their own. They can do it outside of the classroom. So that was a pretty good reinvention of a tool that was working great as a non-IT technology tool and is now a virtual tool for the students to use. And this is about the time when we merged or consolidated with Augusta State University. So our world became much different. So our team, instead of focusing just on the health sciences, now we have liberal arts and all the other programs, professional schools that were on the Somerville campus, which is exciting for us. And we're actually glad to be broadening our horizons and taking on some different content. Our current projects, we developed a Confucius Institute, and the little animation there is of an app that teaches children, and actually anybody, how to speak and write in Chinese. And actually this app is up for an International Gaming Award for educational apps. So we'll be going to Germany this fall to present that app in the final round of competition to the judges. So we did some apps for that for the Chinese, and we had a Chinese faculty member in the College of Education. Turn that off. We developed a Kawa app, dental radiology apps, kidney transplant iBooks. So there's a lot of breadth going on, and we're expanding more than just the health sciences. And here's a little video of what we're going to give you a little preview of what we've been doing from a This is that virtual rhinoscopy. This is the children's app to teach about allergies. This is actually a game, you'll see what this is in a minute, that medical students, whenever they graduate, don't know a lot about contraception. I know that's hard to believe, but they have studies have shown they have a hard time discussing contraception with their patients. And that's actually an interactive, competitive game where the medical students play against each other to see, which sperm gets to fertilize the egg the first. And along the way, it brings up various forms of birth control that they have to work around and get through. And it forces them to learn about those various forms of birth control before they do it. So there's a leaderboard, and that's one that they can actually compete against each other. So some of the lessons learned that we've learned with this is when we first started, we thought, well, the textbook publishers would be interested in this, and we could partner with them and take some of our development skills, take some of their content, and we could have a great partnership, and that would help with marketing and all those kind of things. And that actually proved very difficult. We were never able to close the deal. We had a lot of discussions, but that really didn't pan out. Outsourcing mobile development, depending on what the project is and what the initiative is, sometimes that's the very appropriate thing to do whenever you either don't have the skill set in-house or whenever you can't do it, you can't produce it in the time that it's needed. But in general, outsourcing mobile development is a very expensive proposition, and especially for the academic units, they don't have those kind of deep pockets in order to outsource to create an educational app. We can't do everything for everybody, so our initial focus was on the Apple devices. Since we actually hired a Georgia Tech grad who's brilliant, that helps us to port our apps over to Android devices. And the big thing, though, is that in-house development is doable. So not so much now, but back whenever Flash and all of those things the technologies were changing, that was a great opportunity to help the staff to develop new skills and to take on new interests. And there's different parts of mobile development. Some of it is more graphical in nature. Some of it is definitely more programming in nature, so not everybody's going to be a great fit to be a mobile developer. But if they're a Flash developer and they have the interest, then they can probably bridge the gap into doing some iOS and or Android kind of development. So whenever you develop your strategy, my recommendation would be to start small, identify what your low-hanging fruit is, make sure you understand your customers, your team, what's going to be the biggest bang for your buck, for your effort. The big thing with this is, and sort of our evolution and growth, is that we did start out small. We started with a small app. We had some success. The president, the provost, everybody liked that success. Therefore, it made getting additional funding and growing better. And we didn't make any money on this deal at all. But what we have done is had a lot of publicity for the university and got our name out to a lot of places that we wouldn't have gotten our name out to before. You have to decide whether you want to build or buy. One of the things that my team has discussions about all the time is when do we build a native app versus when do we build a web app? And that's really just around the functionality. So in general, a native app is going to take a lot longer. It's going to be a bigger investment of resources and time. It's going to be more difficult to do. But there's sometimes when you need those features and functionality that you're not going to get in a web app. So it's just a balancing act on figuring out which way the app, balancing your resources, balancing your project schedule and all of that. And the biggest, and this is, everybody knows this, communication is the key to all of the success. So communication within the team, communicating with your customers, that's the biggest step for success. And I tell this to people all the time, that mobile is not the answer to everything. So there's quite a few projects where we turn away because we say, this is really better as a website, or it's really better as a multimedia that's embedded in the LMS, or whatever it may be, that it's not really a mobile app. Students aren't going to just download an app because it's an app. So it has to be meaningful to them, and if they want to give up space on their phone to put it on there, they have to find value in it. So the future of mobile, where we think things are going, certainly in terms of the healthcare is huge with mobile. So we're getting to the point where hospitals, insurance companies, other agencies, they believe that smartphone apps can reduce costs, reduce risk, reduce time to the market, increase the reach. And this is Apple Health. So Dr. Saburka, who usually does this presentation with me, couldn't be here. He's on the board of one of the Apple communities related to healthcare, and they're thinking big in terms of health. So we're talking about, apps that have sensors that can, track your weight, can track your sugar, can track all of those different things. Some of those we've actually already seen in the marketplace, but they're thinking big, and that's really what the future is. And this is just a graphical representation. So you have off-body sensors, you have sensors on your body, or even in your body in some cases, communicate through the internet back to the central service, and then the doctors can see what the data is, the patients can see what the data is, all of those kind of things. So I told you Generation Z is different than the millennial. So, all this time we've been talking millennial, and now we have new students. We have Generation Z. My daughter's part of Generation Z, and they are at a whole nother level. So they're the true digital natives because they were born with mobile. They don't know anything without technology. They can master technology easier in terms of the technologies that they want to master. Maybe not academic technologies and how to appropriately research and do all those kind of things, but the tools that they like and they find value in, they master. And of course, the negative effect is that we're becoming more sedentary, and the students are becoming more sedentary. Everything's with electronics, games, all of that kind of thing. So we have to balance that. Generation Z loves social media platforms. We call them the attention deficit disorder generation, acquired generation, attention deficit disorder generation. They have a short attention span. Information needs to be delivered in rapid short bursts, and they want instant gratification. So they're a little bit like the millennials, but they're taking it to a whole new level. So when we think to 2020, are we even going to call it a phone? And so this is just some examples of different ideas that people have come up with. Are they going to become more holographic? Are you just going to have a little screen that fits in the palm of your hand? And one big thing is the wearables. So we haven't seen, the wearables are just starting to come out with applications that make them more useful. And that's true in the medical space, but even, to track your golf swing, to improve on your golf swing. There's skiing. There's a whole lot of effort being put into wearables to see if that's going to be a sustainable model for at least the short-term future. And the different industries, certainly consumer wearables, healthcare wearables. We have a partnership with Philips, our hospital does, and Philips is really betting on doctors being able to, instead of in an operating room, they have to look away from the patient and they have to look at screens on the walls that tell them all the different statistics and things that are going on with the patient. With the wearables, they can get that in their eyeglass. They don't have to move they don't have to move their head and look at the screen, and so patient safety is improved. And then the electronic health record, which is the vein of every doctor's existence today. They can get that information through the wearable instead of having to go to a laptop or even an iPad to look up that kind of information. And in education, this is just some of the themes that Google's working on with that. And then the same thing with education. So being able to get real time, you look at a place, you look at a statue, you look at whatever, it being able to figure out, with augmented reality, what you're looking at, bring up information about it. So it's that instant gratification to get.
Just completing our interproximal reduction.
And I'll turn the sound off because I know it's disturbing. So I showed you the app before. So the picture there, the video, that's the old app, right? That was on the iPhone. So imagine now that I'm actually in the operatory, which is what the dental office is called, and I'm working with a patient, and I don't want them to see me looking on my iPhone doing a video of the procedure, right? That would make you pretty unnerved if your dentist was having to refer to a little video to make sure that they were doing your crown or whatever, right? So now, with the wearables, all that can be projected in the glass, and the patient doesn't know anything about it. It's just more handy for the dentist or the physician, and it's just an evolution. So the content really hasn't changed, but the way that you view it changes. And these are just different quotes about the wearables. So before we run out of time, I really wanted to have a question and answer session and give you opportunity to ask questions. I do want to say one thing about the profitability and selling apps. So Georgia Regents is a state institution, and one of the issues that we have is the indemnification issues with our attorneys and Apple and other entities. So it's very hard. We legally cannot sell apps through the App Store and all of that as the university, as the state university. Now, we're fortunate in that we have the health system, so we can run that business through the health system, which can accept the contract clauses with Apple and all of that. The other thing is that the model, so there's advantages to the App Store, and the App Store is great in terms of marketing, getting things out there, and all of that. It makes it easy in terms of that. But if you really want to market an app with Apple, the cost, their share of that is such a tremendous cost that we really haven't been pursuing revenue generation through this. Now that we have it set up and we've tried a couple of pilots, we just haven't been able to pull the trigger. I mean, we would have to have an app that sold at a pretty decent cost with a tremendous amount of downloads before the university would actually start to see a profit, if you will. Apple's going to take their share, and then with tech transfer within your university, you know how that's all divided up. So but by the time you're a faculty member, who you want to incent to be innovative and to do these kind of things, before they see the first dollar, everybody else is taking all of their share. And so that makes it challenging in terms of making it a big money-making opportunity. Yes.
Thank you. Very interesting. I'm interested in the virtual rhinoscopy app that you created. I wonder if you could elaborate on, you said that you put a Unity 3D developer, a medical illustrator, probably a medical professional, with 3D Cinema 4D, 3D modeler. You put them all together, and the end result is this learning object, this multimedia learning object. Could you describe the project life cycle for something like that? How much time does it take? How do you put a Unity 3D developer who does not do rhinoscopy in a room and bring them to an understanding of it such they can create 3D models that are actually usable to professionals? And then I hate to ask the question, how much would something like that cost? I mean, in general, all in, how much does it cost to develop something like that?
So those are great questions. That project took a little bit over a year. So the medical, so we always have a multi-function team. So we always have a subject matter expert that's typically a faculty person. And one of our challenges with all of the projects that we take on, so we've shown you the ones that have been published. There's a lot more that were started and never made it to completion. And sometimes a lot of that is because the faculty member doesn't have the time or the energy for a sustained engagement over a period of time. So you really have to pick your projects wisely and really get the faculty to commit to understanding the process and what their involvement's going to be and how long that it's actually going to take. So in this case, we did have a couple of dedicated faculty that were very interested in this. They think technology's cool. They really want their students to do well in learning this subject matter. And we worked with the three people that, in addition to the faculty, that were key to this was the Unity developer, the medical illustrator, and another instructional designer type individual. And the big thing is with medical illustration and some content like this, it all has to be very anatomically correct, and the faculty get extremely specific, and they should be. This is an important subject matter, and you don't want to get it wrong. But a lot of the work was done with creating the imagery and the video pieces first, the overall, getting the faculty member to sign off on that, chunking it, if you will, and then the Unity developer would go back in and would actually program the hotspots, all of the animation, all of those kind of things, working with the medical illustrator, and then along the way the faculty member reviewing it. So it's about a year, and We don't, we're fortunate because the university funds the department, so I don't have to justify the return on investment from a specific project level. So I never have to say that app costs whatever it costs. I never have had to figure that cost. We're looking at the return on investment more in terms of the number of downloads, in terms of the benefit to the students and the faculty, and so the educational benefits, which are a little less tangible sometimes than the a true return on investment.
Yeah, are you working in a sort of bring your own technology environment? So you see lots of different, the students own their stuff and they want to work on their stuff. You're dealing with Chrome, Safari, Explorer, Mozilla, and that's sort of the web. I think you touch native versus web. Through reading certain medical, so you use the acuity into this, you can deliver it as well.
Right, right. So for our students, in terms of mobile, it's a bring your own technology. So it's an open, and so we have to try it. We try to keep a pace on what the students are bringing and what the trends are, and that's sort of where our development focus lies. So, there's no way that we could build an app that's going to fit every platform. In terms of laptops and other devices, we do have a mandatory laptop program that several of the different colleges have, and they can choose. We give them minimum requirements of Mac versus PC, and so that's a little bit easier. But in terms of mobile, it's wide open. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's a very challenging issue. And what may be popular this year may be on the out next year. And so one of the good things about Unity and some of the other tools is that they can help port it to different platforms. So Unity is real good about that. Yeah.
We thought of, pocket models and like that, but what about collaborating with other schools to provide other potential schools?
Well, we've had interest in that, and usually whenever I go and speak about it, I get faculty members that are interested in doing that. And I think I think the challenge is that it's a big time commitment. I've even worked with dental colleges that have had a lot of content, so a lot of videos, a lot of procedures, but not in mobile format, and said, look, just work with us and let us use your content, and we can turn it into the platform. And we just haven't been able to close the deal on those. And it's not from an intent standpoint. I think it's just a matter of time and priority. And faculty are typically so busy, especially the health sciences faculty, all faculty. But, they're balancing having to generate clinical revenue by seeing patients and doing research and teaching. So you really have to get somebody that's truly a believer and dedicated and willing to take a lot of their own time to do that. Yeah. We work with the faculty on that. So for our Dentistry Pro Consult app, we've actually had several revisions, additions, new versions that included either revisions or additions. So the content changes all the time. And the more successful the app is, the students want more content in it. And so with the Pro Consult app, that's actually pretty easy for us to do because we've built it on that template platform, and adding content is not a hard thing to do. Now, the upper respiratory virtual lab, changing that would be a significant, because there's a lot of code, a lot of Unity code and a lot of other things that would be impacted. That would be a major, probably another year to be able to develop a new version of that. One of the things that we talked about is doing in-app purchases as a possibility to, you develop the app initially, and then you think about, like the upper respiratory virtual lab, which has had a tremendous amount of downloads, creating a paid version for a new set of content, but we haven't got to that level yet.
Well, I was
Publishers, right?
like that. So these all, are you trying to work with the large publishers, smaller publishers, and what seems to be the sticking point, I guess, that never closes it all?
For whatever reason, so for the large publishers, you know, back when we were really looking at that, and I haven't tried to work with them recently, but you know, back then in the late '90s, early 2000, they just really were not that interested in doing this. So we did work with, back whenever mobile started to become popular, there was actually a smaller publishing company that wanted to do the same thing, and they had a lot of content, but they didn't have anything really on a platform at a high quality level. And you know, we tried to negotiate, and I think part of the problem was the licensing on the content, and there's a lot of legal issues that are involved in that. So it's a complex beast to be able to do.
The ProConsult template, is that created just for use internally, or have you considered making that open to other universities to use it?
No, we've talked about making it open and letting other people use it. So if anybody's interested in that, we would definitely be willing to look at that. I'd love to see it move into the non-healthcare arena, you know, the non-health sciences education. I think math, science, you know, literally anything where you're trying to teach a procedure or a process, it's perfect for that. And you wouldn't need an iOS developer to be able to do that. So.
If we have time, could you show us the main components of the template that you developed?
I don't have that with me. I don't have that with me right now to where I can show it on the screen. But if I'll leave my business cards up here, and if you want to contact me, I'm happy to you know, have a call with you, or you know, a lot of these apps are free on the App Store, so you can download them, and yeah. Any more questions? All right. Well, very good. Thank you.